cared what I was listening to. I'm like,
Mhm.
all my friends are doing it. It's not like I actively go. And Matt's like, P.S. I'm listening to what I'm listening to. And I'm like, lol, okay. I'm like, I know this isn't your kind of music. He's like, what are you listening to? You listen to this all day? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. And he's like, I dig it, but it's like not my vibe, but I still appreciate it.
Dude, in a way, you're the silent DJ for all of your Discord followers.
Oh yeah, DJ for Discord followers, but also I'm the unanimous DJ in studio when that was a thing. That was one of my favorite experiences. It was just like a Sunday night. We were in studio, and I end up like taking control of my computer and just playing a bunch of good music. And we ended the night with Hannah Montana and High School Musical.
Dude, I think Fran was the biggest shout out to Fran because I know he's gonna be watching this episode. I knew he was a big fan of your tunes. Fran, if I'm wrong, please comment down below and
Yeah, I would do
let's see
anything
if Aaron
to
was actually that good in your opinion. Let's see. I want to hear what you got
I,
to
I
say
would
to
do
that.
anything to have a chance at being studio DJ one more time. I feel
Mhm.
like my playlist improved significantly. Zachy, if you're listening, I put good music on. Let me know in the comments.
My question is, has Silvano approved, or
Yeah, you know what?
has he
Like
heard it?
I think he has heard it, and I think it's been on while we're working. I think it just hasn't been commented on at this point, and it's like, yeah, it's good music.
I definitely want to take a dive into Silvano's playlist. I wonder what he listens to his free
Speaking of
time.
playlists, what's your go-to?
Oh man,
I think I know it. Is it that like 2000s playlist?
yeah. So the like literally the late '90s, early 2000s
Yeah,
playlist. Sometimes I'll listen to a bit of jazz, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm, let's say I'm working or
fair.
I'm studying, I'll play some music in the background, and I'll be a little extra and set up a candle as well. So like, just make it a mood,
Oh
like
yeah, for sure.
sounds a bit too
But in
romantic, but
studio, in studio, we did put on quite a bit of jazz actually.
yeah.
Uh, Francisco would put on some jazz every now and then, but I think I ended up taking over control at one point. But my favorite, I've been the music knowledge
Mm.
person or DJ as you call it, or as some people call it. I wouldn't classify myself as a DJ, but for what it's worth, I was a DJ at the Sea Sky Radio at John Abbott, and I was music director for a while. For what it's worth,
Dude, I wish I was thinking about it today. I'm like, what if me and Aaron met in stage up? Would we have been friends? I think
I
we
think
would
so.
have. Yeah,
I
no,
think
I think
we
we
would
would
have,
have.
but
I
it
was
would
a
have been
little
a
bit
different
more,
context.
dude, I was a little bit more like, I didn't care. In stage up, you know this really well. I've told you this in the past. But
Yeah,
I think you would have steered me in the right direction.
who knows? I would have been a
Probably.
science. I probably would have been that science student that nobody wants to talk to because we're all too swamped with the next exam.
You want to know something funny? I think a majority of my friends were in sciences. Like, no
I
bullshit, bro.
was I was in sciences for a year. Then I did double tech, but I still considered myself more of a science student than a social student.
Oh, dude. Now we're here in our final year of university, and
Yeah,
I can't believe we're doing this topic again. Like,
yeah.
I had a feeling it would come up. I know we've discussed it before. And you know what? At first, when we did this topic, just for a little bit of background for the viewers, we actually did this topic in Herbs 300 in
Oh,
Amy
393. 393.
3. Oh
We're in
my
300
God.
this
Oh, we're in
semester.
300 right now. My bad. I keep thinking about Amy and I keep thinking about all our classes. So essentially, we did this in 393 in our law and regulation class. Me and Aaron teamed up, obviously, and I was super, and I was
Sorry,
excited to team
Pina.
up with him. I think she forgave us. It's okay,
Okay.
even though she threatened me personally. But hey, it's okay. No, she didn't do that. She's too sweet to do that. Anyways, so we basically, and I'm the type of guy, I'm like, dude, if you're interested in the topic, you're invested in it, or you've been following it for a while, I'm very open to it. At first,
And
when I first,
at first we actually went. Mo wasn't in school the first 2 weeks, and
oh yeah,
our
for the
prof was
first
like,
two
pick a
weeks or the
topic.
first 1 week?
First 1 week, but I think it felt like 2 or even a month without you there. And
Traditions.
like he wasn't there, so I was scrambling, and I think I
Mhm.
remember doing something at skating rinks at some point. We were gonna look into
Oh
the
yeah, dude.
regulations behind skating rinks, and we were gonna get a call with the freedom workers and figure out what it takes to put up a skating rink in Montreal and what are the laws and regulations behind skating rinks. Um, Luckily we didn't do that.
Dude, I remember one person reacted really negatively to the idea. I don't know who said this, but I still think of this criticism to this day. When I think you're the one who suggested the idea, we'll call one of the people working at the skating rink, right? And imagine you calling them up and you're asking them like rules and regulations, and they're like, dude, what are you even
What are
talking
the
about, bro? This is
bylaws
a
behind
part-time
it?
job.
Yeah. We were gonna we so we are the project consisted of looking at like the regulations and the context for something to be implemented. So yeah, at first we thought skating rinks because we were thinking about current developments in Montreal. And then we somehow, I don't know how, it went from skating rinks to one of my favorite planning projects, the Cavendish extension.
Oh yeah, and honestly, quite frankly, I was a bit confused with this project too. I've heard of it, I've read about it on the news because it's considered a very flashy development project or ongoing. I don't even know if we can classify it as ongoing, but we will talk a little bit deeper into it as soon as we start on the topic. But I was just generally confused with the vagueness of what we like. For me, it was like, okay, great, the Cavendish extension. What else? Give me further instructions, because to be fair, and Amy, this isn't your fault if you're watching this, but I felt like we didn't get enough like detail on exactly what we had to do, what we had to find, or what the main goal or objective was. So to all the professors in our department, I'll personally say this: give us a little bit more guidelines on what you expect. I love the idea of how it's open ended, it's general, which gives us students a lot of room to play around with the topic and explore many different areas within that topic. But give us what you're hoping to achieve out of our topic, even if that's general as well, general objective, a general goal, a general like achievement that the project may have made and that we need to understand, or we need to come up with predictions, conclusions. So for me, that was the hardest part. And when I first looked at that project in detail, Aaron, I was more on the confused end. And I was like, what do I find? And then you guided me through on how I should find regulations regarding the railway yards, which I want to dive into a little bit deeper when we get into
Yeah,
this episode. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a very interesting project. And we're not the only ones who have been interested in this. Some of our viewers have actually been asking for more information on this area. Um, my grandparents have been asking for more information too. Not that they watch the podcast, but they live in Côte St. Luc, and it would cut down travel time from Dullard to Côte St. Luc from 25 minutes to an
Mhm.
hour to maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Um, and I don't want to say it's what got me interested in planning because that's a long story that's reserved for the grad school applications. um, that's one of the projects that got me interested in planning,
Mhm.
but my real love of planning started when I was a wee young boy, and I had the sixth sense of where parks were. We'd be driving around town, probably to Côte St. Luc, actually,
Okay.
and I'd be in the car crying every time I saw a park. And I didn't even like I couldn't see out the window. I was in a car seat, and we
Mhm.
know that those babies can't lift their neck up. Somehow I had a sense for where parks were, and if we passed one and we didn't stop, I ended up crying. So my parents had to like sit and map out routes without parks being involved.
I bet.
Um, and yeah, I guess since then I've planned a few parks, and then I also fell in love with trains. So when I get to work on projects relating to trains, I'm like, yes, this is I'm all for it. And for some reason, every one of the big projects I ended up working on, whether it's been Gorilla Park,
Mhm.
whether it's the Sud-West project I'm working on now, it involves trains. Choo choo,
Transportation, baby. Hot topic for urban
choo choo.
planners. And a
Yeah,
lot of people, even in our, I think in our department, are just huge, are really invested in transport.
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
Cavendish project is like literally at the heart of transportation for so many reasons. And
I'm
fun
going to
fact,
surprise
it's
you at one point
oh,
regarding
surprise
what
me.
else I found. You know
So
what? We'll dive into the topic, and
yeah, let's
I'll
dive
pick
into
on
the
one
topic.
area of the topic. I'll pick on one area of the topic after we go over first the historical background when this project started, the various updates we got throughout the years regarding it. Then we will speak about the various stakeholders. I have a few stakeholders that I listed that I found through articles, but there may be more that I don't know about. So we'll discuss that, and I think, and what's going on today, the latest
Yeah,
updates, and there are latest updates. So,
yeah,
Aaron,
as
should we
of
start
even last
with?
week.
Oh yeah, like exactly. I think we read the same article.
Like January, sorry, not last week. January
It was
25th, there was an update, and
yeah.
we'll give you what that update was, and we'll break it down for you, as in like it's deadline day for the NHL and it's trade deadline. We'll break it down trades as they happen, or transactions as they happen.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I guess I could start with a little history, or Mo, do you want to start with the history? I feel like I'm always the one giving the history lecture here.
So you know what? I'll start with the history. I
Go
will
for it.
open up all my notes that I took. Okay. So essentially, I'm on the wrong note on the wrong Google Docs. So I'm going to switch right now. Access denied. Okay. Aaron, why don't you kick
Okay,
us off and I'll continue when I
no
open
problem.
up the right
So
notes.
basically, this project has been in the works since the 1960s. For those who are unsure what happened in the 60s, basically there's been a rise in the number of automobiles in Montreal, and there's been a rise in the number of highways. Notably, we've had like the introduction of the Highway 40, Highway 20, and most importantly, DeCarry, which is one of the busiest links in Montreal. So the Cavendish extension is indirectly tied to DeCarry. It's a couple of kilometers away, or a single kilometer away. I forget the exact number. Um, it's located within the Namiok Hippodrome area, so
Mhm.
there's part of it in Saint Laurent, but there's another part of it in Côte Saint Luc. But this project also impacts the city of Hampstead and the town of Mount Royal, or TMR. So in the 60s, the carry was built, and since the 60s, they've been saying that the carry has been congested. And over the years, they've been wanting to increase and improve mobility, or people how people get around the city by extending Cavendish. So right now you have a chunk of it that ends at Côte Saint Luc, and then another chunk that technically starts near the IKEA in Saint Laurent. And if you even go to the ends of Cavendish, you could probably see the other side. There's just a massive train yard in the middle of it. And over the years, this train yard has been subject to numerous debates.
Mhm.
And this isn't the first like train yard relocation project in Montreal. Because what would happen is the train yards would have to be relocated or reappropriated in a way where a road could be built connecting Cavendish. Now, for context, in the Montreal area, these lines actually loop around Côte Saint Luc, and they separate Côte Saint Luc and Saint Laurent and Dorval and Lachine. Um, and they go all the way out to the Outremont Yards, which is now the Université de Montréal campus. Um, and then they go elsewhere, like towards the airport and towards the Port de Montréal, so the Montreal port. But they're an extensive network, just centered at the heart of the island, geographically speaking, because the heart of the island,
Mhm.
culturally and socially speaking, is Mount Royal. But at the heart of the island, geographically, you have this massive, massive train yard that we can't really do anything about. But there was another one similar in Outremont where it's been completely redeveloped, and now there's a new university campus on it. So it's been done in Montreal, but that's not the point.
Yeah, and basically, man, like basically from what Aaron has said regarding the history, it's been a long time. It's been
Yeah.
over 50 years. It essentially started in the mid 1960s. It got put to a stop. Then there were various studies that were done from in the 80s and 90s and the year 2000. essentially the goal of the extension is to complete the road network, right? To create an east-west link to Dick Boulevard, to create a
Yeah,
north-south link from St. Luc to the borough of St. Laurent. Now, apparently, what this project proves to do is improve the accessibility within this sector and all means of transport to ensure that traffic conditions are conductive, which will lead to economic prosperity and the well-being of residents. Now, what's interesting is let's I'm going to get into what I found interesting regarding the rail yards because
yeah.
when Aaron and I were
And
doing,
we're gonna
yeah.
do a little bit more context. So, in terms of current transit access, it's currently kind of close to the Namur Metro, but that's tied to the Hippodrome, which
Yeah.
is now the abandoned horse yard, which is currently undergoing zoning, and that's a whole other project in itself. But for it to be successful, many planners argue that the Cavendish extension has to happen. And it's technically also close to Du Collège on the Carry and on the 40.
Yeah.
Um, and other contexts in terms of road transportation. Currently, to get out of Côte Saint Luc, there are only two ways out. So you either have to go down to Westminster and go down the tunnel on Westminster, and then go down Côte Saint Luc Road, or go down the other end of Cavendish. And I believe 5 years ago there was actually a flood on in the Cavendish tunnel, so that only left one way of getting out of Côte Saint Luc, which isn't the best option for a
Mhm.
city.
Yeah, and every time I think about this project, Aaron, I think about the rail yards. I don't know why that's something that sticks out to me. It's just because I
Yeah,
think that's the one, essentially
that's the
they're trying
big
to extend.
problem.
That's the big problem, right?
Yeah,
And it's funny because they keep talking about this extension. The mayors go back and forth
yeah,
between different municipalities and the cities. They go back and forth constantly about the project. They meet, whether they meet annually, biannually, who knows? We only get we
biweekly.
by yeah, because honestly, not all the information is released to us, and I'm sure everyone knows this. But the thing is, they never talk about these stakeholders, which would be the Canadian Pacific Railways, um,
And Canadian National.
Canadian National. They're both. So my question is like, is there a partnership going on between both of them for this area? Like, what are the actual regulations on their behalf regarding this area? What are the laws? Like, who owns what? Is it a
Yeah.
50-50? Is it
So
what operations can be run? Yeah.
I always get confused between this one. Let me double check. Canadian National is a private company, I think.
I remember this from our project.
Um, I always forget which one's which because Canadian National Railway is headquartered in Montreal. Yeah, that doesn't really help. It's the largest railway in Canada. Doesn't really help
I think
either.
CN is public, and
Okay, yeah, CN is public. Yeah,
and
no, wait.
CP is private.
CN is privatized.
Wait, what?
Yeah. On November 17th, 1995, the government of Canada privatized CN.
Interesting.
So the other one, Canadian Pacific, is and you're probably wondering why does it matter if it's public or private? Well, we're gonna get into that in a second. I'm just confirming my theory.
Yeah,
Canadian Pacific is the one that is public. It's owned
makes
by
sense.
yeah, it's a yeah, okay. Canadian wait, if it's on the stock market, it's private, right?
So yeah, if it's so it's publicly traded, right? If it's on the stock market. So
Yeah.
that's why I thought CN was because I
Okay.
know CN is public because they are on the stock market unless they become
But CP's
privatized.
on the stock market too.
Did we give the wrong presentation in class? Oops. Because we claimed one of them was private and one of them was public, just for some context. And we really based a lot of our knowledge regarding private and public companies within what could happen within the land use regulation.
Oh wait, okay. CN is sorry about that. CN is still a Canadian Crown
Y-
corporation.
yes, exactly.
And as of 2019, right, Bill Gates is actually one of the leading stakeholders.
Yeah.
for CN.
Yeah, that's big.
So technically Microsoft controls CN, but that's a different story. um, so I always get confused between the two, and I'm sorry about that. But basically, CN is a government entity, and it's a federal government entity, and CP is a private company. And why this is important is because when you start looking at the laws, um, because CN is a nationally owned company and it's a crown corporation, it's under subject to be ruled, and the powers are given by the federal government. So technically speaking, the federal government owns some of this land,
Mhm.
like the land under the tracks, basically.
Yeah.
But because it's both CN and CP yards, both private and the public sector, being the federal government, own the lands. So
Yeah.
those are two stakeholders. But then add in the city of Côte St. Luc, the city of Hampstead, the municipality of the town of Mount Royal, and the borough of Montreal, um, NDG, and Saint Laurent. That's five. Yeah, that seems right.
Yep.
NDG, TMR. Yeah. So it's partly under the jurisdiction of the borough of Montreal. Sorry, the city of Montreal through the boroughs of Saint Laurent
Yeah.
and NDG. And it's also partly owned by the cities of Hampstead, of Côte St. Luc, and
Exactly.
of TMR. And
Yeah.
all these groups don't necessarily have the same agenda. And they all have different priorities, right? Um, and because of this, it's hard for them to all sit at one table and agree that the Cavendish extension should be done and prioritized.
Yep.
So this was an ongoing problem, especially in the early 2000s, where Côte St. Luc actually didn't want any part in this project. The city of Montreal wanted it, the city of TMR wanted it, but the city of Côte St. Luc was very hesitant about the project and bringing more traffic into the city. Now, things have turned a bit, and all five municipal parties actually agree on something, which is shocking because that never happens. So the five boroughs and cities actually
Mhm.
agree that the Cavendish extension should be done, but we still have the federal government who's involved and the
Yep.
private company of CP, Canadian Pacific's private.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's easy to remember. Canadian Pacific Private, CPP Private. Wait, that doesn't make any sense because private and public. Never mind.
I was gonna say anything. I was gonna be like, let's let him run with his flow. And one thing the viewer should understand is, and this is very like through various projects you study in this program or anything you research, right? Stakeholders. These are heavy stakeholders
Yeah,
involved in this project. So what happens with heavy stakeholders or many stakeholders, right, is the development process just takes a little bit longer. Okay. And by a little
yeah,
bit, it could take a lot longer. Right. Oh man.
yeah. So it has to get approved by every government
Yeah.
involved, and that's where it
Yeah.
gets complicated because it has to go through their own councils, and councils can turn it down and reject it. And often councils go based on master plans. So master
Yeah.
plans are long-term visions, um, not like Elon's tweets, but that's
Mhm.
another story too. It's long-term visions of an area. So these master plans are crucial.
Mhm.
And Montreal's transportation plan was last updated in 2004, and one of the main priorities of the plan was to do something about the Namur Hippodrome
Mhm.
area, potentially expanding Cavendish.
I'm just curious within these groups of stakeholders, these boroughs, the city of Montreal, Hampstead, right? Literally everyone involved. I wonder how many planners within these respective governments are actually involved in this project, which is information we don't get. Like that's the type of information you have to go out and get. Now, don't go out now and try to seek speaking to government officials just because of COVID and offices are not open. And I've noticed various cities, right? I recently made a complaint to the city of Brossard. I'm not going to get into the story why, but getting a hold of cities in general, government offices, is extremely difficult at this time, and they don't. And the sad truth is that a resident's opinion is not valued. It's really not, right?
Yeah,
Especially if you're complaining, you don't have the best tone, and this is where constructive criticism comes in, but they don't take that. They'll call a representative, they'll hear you out, they'll let you rant, and they'll be like, okay, we'll pass it on. Is it getting passed on? Probably not, right?
yeah.
So I just out of curiosity, I wonder if citizens are involved with this, the citizens of Côte Saint Luc, and I wonder if any urban planners are involved in these projects, because
So in terms of planners being involved,
do you know
planners
anything
are
about that?
definitely planners are definitely involved in this project. And part of any project, and this is why it gets really long and complicated to why nothing gets done. There's a process that has to get done on citizen participation. The citizens' rights do have to be heard. They don't have to be listened to. They don't have to be cared for. Sorry, they do have to be listened to, but whether their actions actually get done, it doesn't matter because the
Mhm,
city could have its own agenda, or the borough could have its own agenda.
mhm,
Um, there have definitely been planners involved in this. The mayor of Côte St. Luc is actually like one of the former mayors of Côte St. Luc is actually a former planner, and he was one of the advocates for this project.
mhm,
If you look at other planning institutions, the University of McGill is foundational in it, in sense, and I think Concordia has even done some projects on it too. Don't quote me on that, but I know that last year, um, the University of McGill planning students, they did a whole working project and created a whole report
mhm,
on this area, particularly Namur Hippodrome, but they also focused on why the Cavendish extension should be done. And they worked with that city mayor from Côte St. Luc. I'm blanking on his name right now. It'll maybe come to me. They worked together to produce that report where they've made recommendations on to ensure how this could be implemented and how it's actually feasible. Um, if you look at all the people who've worked on master plans in Montreal, it's listed in a majority of master plans. There's just been no follow through for whatever reason, right? Back in 2004, it was proposed in the master plan, and then if you look even recently when they did their when the city proposed the urban corridor plan and the bike path network, which is the what's the acronym for that? The Réseau Express Vélo, right? REV, which they have on Saint Denis.
mhm.
One of the main areas that they wanted to have on it was the Cavendish extension.
No, and it
So
makes me
what they wanted
question.
to do was connect
Mhm.
from Saint Laurent, like from Parc du Nature in Sarguet, all the way to the Lachine Canal, which
Yeah,
is a which is something that should be done because there are no east-west connections in the city unless you want to bike on the Carry
yeah, no,
or
and
bike
that's
on the
not.
Victoria.
I was literally thinking about that for a second. I'm like, you don't want to bike on the Victoria. That's literally the scariest experience you can go through.
Not the bridge, not the bridge
So, so,
on Victoria in like Côte de Neige.
so I was thinking about the bridge for a second, right? Because on the Victoria, the train,
Yeah.
literally the train comes on, and I've one of my family friends, huge biker. I wonder if Will has done it. It has a biking lane that's literally right like next to the part where the train runs, and it literally
Oh.
shakes up the whole bridge. So like when you said Victoria, that went onto my mind, and he literally thought he was gonna like fall off the bridge while biking. So like, oh man. No, getting back on topic though. I wonder how I love the fact that McGill's taking initiative and their students are taking initiative to investigate this project further and maybe create
Yeah.
a better understanding for future planners, or basically giving ideas on how this could be done in a more
Yeah.
efficient manner, right? I wonder
And
if
one
these
of the major
considerations.
problems
Yeah,
and one of the major holdups right now, regardless of what the municipalities think, which right now is that they all want this project and the city of Montreal actively wants this project. The problem is it's the location of the train yards, right? Um, and unfortunately, you won't like they have so many plans to extend Cavendish, right? There, I've seen some tunnels, I've seen some level configurations, I've seen some bridges, I've seen it all when it comes to the
Hmm.
Cavendish extension. My favorite's the bridge. I think it's the most realistic. I don't think a ground level one would look appealing. Um, but either way, what happens is there's two problems. First problem is the train yard. There are certain regulations in place by the Ministry of Transport for the federal government, which prohibits any construction of a road for vehicles or for houses above a train yard. So that's one problem. Now we can't just go, okay, train yard, bye bye. We don't need trains. We're in 2021. If you wonder how your Amazon packages get to you so quickly, it's probably in part because there's a train somewhere involved in the process. Uh, but one of the plans is to move this train yard that's at the heart of Montreal to off island, to a part in the Centre, which is close to the Ontario border.
Hmm.
Um, and would this cause any problems? No, it would not. It would free up a whole plot of land in the middle of the city. But there's been some reluctancy to actually move the arts that far away from the airport and the port. So it hasn't necessarily been done.
So you know what I think about? I think about how valuable that land is right now, right? If
Yeah.
CP and CN decided to sell this land, they would they would essentially make a lot of money because they've
Well, it's
had it
highly
for countless.
contaminated, so
It's highly contaminated, but
but
still,
it's like
regardless,
at the center of the island. It's right near the airport, right?
and the contamination point was going to be my next point, right? It will still be highly valuable. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the problem is, great, they'll make a profit. They'll leave the area. They'll let the cities handle it. But the cost of handling the contamination and resolving it will will cost a fortune.
Yeah.
It's literally, I remember on one development project with a commercial, well, it was a mixed use building actually, and they had a yard at the back that was costing
Yeah.
$100,000
And like if you
just to
look at the
fix.
costs
Yeah,
associated with the decontamination of the lands out in Outremont,
yeah,
those costs are astronomical, right? On top of the
yeah.
cost for the new campus, it's astronomical costs, and like it's a whole new development now, a whole new area. But it took them years to decontaminate the land. Um, and that's one of the big problems. Like as soon as that yard leaves, as much as I want it to leave, we have to decontaminate that land.
We have to decontaminate that land, and even the expense that CN and CP would have to take on just to
Yeah,
move all their literally all their junk off that land.
yeah.
It's a process, man. Even the
So
decontamination process is
that's one
scary.
part of the process. And another part of the process is that right now, especially, cities are not getting revenues that they need, right? So it's they normally get revenues, cities normally get revenues through property taxes.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we can't necessarily increase it because there's a lot of people who've been laid off from their jobs. The federal government isn't really getting much money either, and municipalities are tied and can't really raise funds on their own. So they rely heavily on property taxes. Now, if you're building a bridge over a train yard, that's fine, but it provides zero value to the property itself. So building that bridge, it's not like you could start putting up towers right next to it. It's
Mhm.
literally just going to be an empty bridge that has zero value. You cannot develop anywhere near it. And the two areas at the end of it are basically already developed except for the hippodrome. So that's why the hippodrome would undergo some massive redevelopments. And people are wondering like, why is the hippodrome involved in this? If you look at a map, it would have to go through the industrial complex in TMR,
Mhm.
and then it would have to go through Côte Saint Luc. It can't just cross directly because of the train line. So it has to connect from Saint Laurent to like in a roundabout way, in a way.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's why it's like directly linked to the hippodrome development. But all these cities and municipalities are realizing, well, first off, it's hard to get all of our people at the negotiating table. But when it comes to actually building something, first off, they can't. And then they'd have to find a way to split the revenue, which they can't because they can't build anything
Hmm.
for that parcel of land, right? At least like when the Champlain Bridge was built, even though it's a bridge over water, there was significant commercial value that was brought to the table. And it wasn't paid by the government of Montreal. It was paid by the big federal government and held by the Quebec government too. Right? Same for the Mercier Bridge, same thing. And like
Hmm.
they're like, oh yes, it brings in all these municipalities. There's no justification for Cavendish. And you can't start building TODs, transit oriented developments, on the side, especially if you have to decontaminate land and that it's still federal land.
Yeah, and you know what surprises me, because in a lot of the statements I've read, a lot of the articles I read during these meetings, these closed meetings, they would discuss TOD. They would talk about the various forms of transport that can be brought along this
Yeah,
expansion. I think that conversation, to be very frank, is too far. It's too far now. We can't
yeah,
discuss this right now. There's a lot that needs to be done, and that hasn't been done in the past 50, more than 50 years now.
60 years, yeah.
Oof. Every time I hear a number that big, every time I hear decades worth
Well, it
of
was the same with the Blue Line in Montreal, right? The Montreal Blue Line extension in the East End took the same amount of time, and now it's finally getting
Montreal has
built.
a very interesting pattern in development.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you know what's funny, because I recently did a little bit more investigation on the rail yards that I think is worth mentioning for this. And Aaron, thank you so much for the information, going deep into the problems that will come within the project,
yeah,
especially the fact that you brought in the revenues, the lack of coordination that could come between these boroughs and municipalities and the city of Montreal, and how these bridges, such as the new Champlain Bridge, was funded by the federal government, and how they were actively involved in the process. So do you think, now last question to you, right? Do you think the federal government will have to get involved in a project like this? Or do you think it would sort of be embarrassing that we would have to involve them?
I would say two things. It would
Tell me.
be highly embarrassing that we have to get them involved in this project, right? Like the Champlain Bridge is the busiest bridge in all of Canada, if I'm not mistaken. It brings
I
in,
would say so. Yeah, I think it is actually.
yeah, I don't have the numbers, but it brings in a lot of people. But for for the plan, and if you look at the Champlain, what it's 3 lanes in each direction plus
Hmm.
the rim, right?
Yep.
3 lanes in each or four?
I'm going to say there is there's 4 lanes.
Okay, 4 lanes in each
Yeah,
direction plus the 2 lines of rim in the middle.
exactly.
That's massive amounts of infrastructure,
Hmm.
right? For all the plans that I've seen for this project, it wouldn't be highly embarrassing, but the plans that I've seen for the Cavendish extension, I've seen a bridge with uh 2 lanes on each side. So
Hmm.
1 lane for cars, only 1 lane for cars, keep that in mind. 1 lane for bikers and walkers, and then a lane in the middle for transit, or 2 lanes in the middle for transit. So
Hmm.
like the size of this infrastructure doesn't necessarily compare to the Champlain Bridge. And in terms of vehicle flows, it's significantly less than the Champlain Bridge. And as much as I want the federal government to intervene in this, um, I think if they do this, then they're going to have other problems, right? Like it's not only going to be a matter of, oh, we did the Cavendish extension. They're going to have like in Toronto, they're going to be like, well, we have a similar project. There's a rail yard happening here. It wasn't covered. We're going to get the federal government to
So it'll
intervene.
increase dependency on the federal government
It will
with all the
increase
with all these
dependency
provinces.
on the federal government. Yeah, I think the other problem tied to revenue that I forgot to mention, the
Hmm.
Hippodrome project is aimed to be low income housing. That's one thing, which doesn't bring in a lot of revenue, but it's what the city needs. And if you're bringing on the city of Côte Saint Luc, the city of Hampstead, and the city of TMR, they're all wealthier than the borough of Montreal or the
Yeah.
borough of Côte-de-Neige, NDG, in Montreal, which is actually one of the poorest boroughs in Montreal. So when you're splitting that revenue because it's indirectly tied to the Cavendish extension, you run into a problem. And
Yeah.
that's where the conversation is just stopping because, okay, there's no way of bringing in revenue from this. Um, it does add transit and does add active biking, but it doesn't add any monetary value.
Oh yeah. No, and that's definitely the point they're stuck at. And you know what I've been thinking. Now, so first, another question, and this question will be mainly for our viewers. This information is how many kilometers worth of the extension? How many kilometers will this extension be? Do you have any idea?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but
Didn't they have a map online where they showed like
yeah.
the distances? So I'm reading one of them. Um, so they're saying over here, would it be a 0.5 kilometer increase?
Yeah, so oh yeah, okay, I'm seeing the same map that you are now.
So if there's one
It's
that's
a
going
point 5
0.75,
kilometers.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's like the total of it. So it would be a
total of it, okay,
1.25 kilometer bridge
worth of construction, okay,
or extension or
yeah,
project.
yeah, okay.
And,
So
and like to put it into perspective, 1.25 kilometers is basically the distance from McGill to Concordia, if not less.
yeah, I think it's actually I would say around the same distance. Yeah,
So
no, I
it's
would
like I'm gonna double check because
yeah.
power of technology is right in front of me. But
Actually, yeah, just go ahead and check. I'm very curious because this will give our viewers a better idea of like
okay, so
the
it's
distance.
900 meters from Concordia to McGill.
Okay.
So
Is it that 0.9 kilometers then? I'm just trying to do math on the top of my head.
yeah, zero point. Did you just ask if 900 meters is 0.9 kilometers, bro?
I just asked that question. Was that a good question?
No. King Henry died. Mother didn't care much.
How many kilometers is that? Just
Point
give it
nine.
0.9? Okay, good. I thought I was wrong for a
Okay.
second. I'm like, am I doing the right
No,
division?
but
No.
like it's easy calculation. Sorry. I'm
Slightly disappointed in my math right now.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, I got the
So
number
it's
right. That's what matters.
yeah. Okay, maybe a better comparison would be from if you walk from Concordia to Gru.
Think of
No, that's 1.6 kilometers. Okay.
it's close. It's close
Walk
enough though. Not like
yeah,
we're saying 1.25, right? Between 0.75 and 0.5.
yeah.
I'll say, what about Atwater? From McGill to Atwater.
No, it's two.
That's two. Okay. Um, how about
So
Concord? Yeah, actually,
it's slightly more like say you're walking halfway from Atwater to Concordia,
yeah.
and then you walk to McGill.
Okay, my next point would be from Concordia to Atwater simply, but
No, from Concordia to Atwater, it's too small.
too small. Okay. Damn, I'm trying to find. Now we have to go. We have to try to find a restaurant or something along.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like a 1.25 kilometer trek is a big fuss, and this is what we're currently being fussed about. A 1.25 kilometer expansion that would cost something like 250 million, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it was 250 million, I remember,
yeah,
based on the project, based on our 393 project. Okay, now
yeah,
look, I had some extra thoughts, and this is where I wanted to
yeah,
bring the rail yards
yeah.
into play here because I don't know why, like, just I'm instinctively thinking the rail yards is a huge part of this project, but I
Yeah.
think there's a deep rooted issue that that is obviously not being that is obviously not public information, right? Sure, contamination is one thing. The process of removing CN and CP from those lands is a process in itself. But you know what I was thinking, that these various stakeholders, the problems that they're having is what they actually wanted to do with the rail yard lands. And let me get
Mhm.
into this right now. Okay. Now CSL residents, Côte Saint Luc residents,
Hold
were
on, hold on.
hoping.
Before you do that, a
Yeah.
primer on trains and real estate development. Um, Trains over history, especially in Canada, they have used their land in nefarious ways. I don't know if nefarious is the right word, but
No, I
um,
get what you mean. Yeah.
they've used their land and they've used their power as the rail companies to do some crazy, crazy, and stupid stuff that eventually led to the founding of Vancouver. uh, they're like, we need a Westport. Let's build it here, and then they built up around the train station because it was CN property or CP property, and yeah. But the train companies do have some real estate ambitions, or they used to back in the day.
You know what's funny? Real estate was going to be my next point regarding this.
Okay.
Okay, so you sort of like dipped into it, right? Because a lot of the Côte Saint Luc residents have hoped the yards would be removed because obviously because of train noise, worries about a potential rail disaster. And within history, a lot of CSL residents were worried what these trains were carrying, whether they were safe, whether there would be problems that would happen overnight, so on and so forth, right? So they were hoping that it would either accommodate what we're talking about, a Cavendish extension, or a potential housing development.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, keep in mind the CP, Canadian Pacific Rail Yards, take up to 1/3 of Côte Saint Luc,
Yeah.
land that the city would like to repurchase. Okay. And Mayor Mitchell Brownstein, I
He
think
was
that
the
was the name we were
planner.
looking for.
Yes.
Yes. Says owning that land, I'm going to quote him, would be a great boom for the city, which it desperately needs. The land for housing and business development. Okay. So we're kicking into a little bit of real estate in here. The railway company has owned the land over 100 years, and Brownstein said CP would make a profit by selling. But when we speak about contaminant, this is where it throws me off, right? Because I was aware of the contamination issue that whole land had. So obviously we don't have the numbers with us, how valuable that land is today, but how much it would also cost to decontaminate that land. So I think my honest thing, like mindset, was that housing and having further business development within that zone would lead to better profit rather than
Oh, for sure.
actually extending rather than extending Cavendish, right? And
But
I think
like,
this is
in
where they were
order
stuck.
to be able to generate that profit, you still need the cat. Like, what normally happens in development is you have the funds and then you could go out and build it. In this case, you need to acquire the funds and then you could build it. But you also need to build the road and build this connection before you do anything,
So,
right?
let me tell you one thing, right? You bring a good point, but if they got development kickstarted, right, by hiring contractors, by getting construction set, right? Now this would lead to investment in the project, okay,
Yeah.
which would bring in a lot more stakeholders,
Yeah.
right? Investors would play a huge role. And similarly, what they did here with the Solar City in this haunt in Brossard, a lot of people purchased the property early on, even before it was released, because what real estate developers would do is they would promote, and this is where real estate agents or brokers would come in. They would set up foundation around that land and office, and they
Yeah.
would basically have a whole blueprint and diagram, right? And these are basically like points that I'm bringing based on experience, is that they would have blueprints set up. They would have like they would have architects explaining what would happen,
Yeah.
how it's going, contractors, architects, whoever you want to call here, right? And this would eventually get people and investors, right? This would get
Yeah.
people to invest in these lands beforehand. And this is
Yeah.
where capital could accumulate from.
Yeah.
So, and it's much easier in my, sure, they don't have, let's assume that they don't have the necessary capital to kickstart the project, right? But is it easily acquirable? 100%,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
But like the other question I raise is,
Ask
okay,
the
we are
question,
going
raise
to
it.
we are going to be raising profit for these real estate developers, right?
Yeah.
But who are they going to build the light rail transit system that connect? Oh, sorry, are they going to build the Cavendish
Oh,
extension?
hell no.
No. They're just gonna go build off somewhere else,
This is
right? Like they're
purely
gonna be
based off
like,
of profit.
yeah, so it's purely based on profit, and that's the thing. Who's gonna end up paying for that link, right? Like you could start expanding Code St. Luke, but they're gonna be like, oh, we need more buses, we need more access to metro, right? Um, who's gonna be footing that bill?
Dude, honestly, look, all the city, the boroughs, look, Mayor Brownstein, they're dude, they're gonna be at a huge advantage. Like this
Yeah,
will raise profits, and then it'll become a whole other process if they want to accommodate TODs or different forms of transportations,
yeah.
like bringing a bus line, right? Like,
And like, I just want to give
oh man.
the viewers some of the scopes of the projects that I've seen. So I've seen a massive tram line that goes down all Cavendish and connects you from Cavendish Mall to Côte St. Luc Shopping Center to Montreal West train station and somehow to the airport. Okay. And then to Saint Laurent too. I've seen plans where it's simply a bus. I've seen
Mhm.
plans where it's the blue line extension to Côte St. Luc of the metro, right? I've seen an insane amount of plans when it comes to this. Um, or like a matter of increasing and doing like a few trams that connect to the rim. But this was before the rim was a thing. But like now it would be connecting and doing an offshoot of the rim to get to Côte St. Luc, which would be hilarious.
Mhm.
Um, or I've seen like a bike path that goes from St. Lawrence to Lachine Canal through this area, which would be a massive thing. In terms of transit, there's also the St. Jerome train line that actually runs through Montreal West and then goes to Vendôme and to the Bell Center. Um, there's no stops until you get to Park X. There's actually been talks. This is closer to Côte St. Luc Road than the Cavendish extension, but I've seen talks about increasing and putting new commuter train stops at those points along that line. I've seen so many transit proposals.
Yeah. No, and I think for the viewers to understand as well and to add on to your points, Aaron, is basically what Aaron is trying to say that, and look, yes, we've been joking. We've been having fun with this topic, right? I've been enjoying sort of bashing uh the fact that how this project has taken up to 60 years now, right?
Yeah,
And it still hasn't, I don't
and
even
like
know what steps we can
if
what
you
can be
look
said about
at
this project.
the Montreal master plan, okay, they don't necessarily commit to doing anything, which is a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but now they're in the process of redoing master plans, right?
Mhm.
And they're actually talking about removing this project from master
Yeah.
plan. If you look at the ARTM master plan in public consultation right now, there's actually a whole fight to bring this issue back up to the table. And this, like, why are we still debating that this is an issue? We know it's an issue.
Yeah.
Do something about it.
Yeah, and look, and I think the main thing as planners, as future planners, as prospective, if prospective is the right
Yeah.
word, planners,
Or
we need to
aspiring.
understand,
Yeah.
oh yeah, aspiring planners, whatever you want to, whatever word term you want to use, right? Now we have to understand that development processes are not supposed to be easy, especially if you want
They
something
don't
good coming
happen
out.
when you snap your fingers.
Exactly, right?
You
Now,
can't call Will Smith and be Genie.
exactly.
I need a wish.
I love that
I
movie, by
want
the
the
way. I
Cavendish
loved Will Smith
extension
as a
done.
genie, by the way.
Yes.
That was pretty amazing. Like I watched that movie in theaters. Oh man, I loved it. Okay. Basically, look, like the development process is not supposed to be easy. You can't
Yeah.
snap your fingers, you can't call the genie. We fully understand that. But what we need to keep in mind is that what we try to always try to emphasize on this podcast is that the development process should have a good plan, okay, where it can be effective. It can be a smooth, effective plan that has a timeline. Now, it doesn't matter if that timeline is long, as long as there is a timeline and there's commitment, right, among the stakeholders. And this project, as an example, goes to show that stakeholders play a huge part. They
Yeah.
can literally affect the timeline or affect
Yeah.
what's exactly being outputted in the project, right? And now I seriously think that these stakeholders had a clash of wanting to continue the extent of wanting to extend Cavendish versus building versus real estate development, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure it was
And
on the table.
I'm sure it was on the table, but like all of the municipalities actually came together and signed a letter supporting one another for this project. Um, as recently as the 25th of January, they actually moved this to the Council of Montreal so that Madame Mairesse Valérie Plante does not ignore this issue. And they moved it to council, and it was backed by, well, first off, the borough mayor for NDG, also the borough mayor of Saint Laurent,
Yep.
a critic of Valérie Plante, but he brought this plan to the table and said, when we are doing our future plans, whether it's the mobility plan that's somewhere in the city works, or it's the new ARTM plan, that this is a fundamental issue and pillar of this plan.
Of course. Yeah. It's a huge issue that's been in our city for a long, long time that needs to be addressed, or you know what, whether it be addressed in actually getting development start, like, of actually starting development, kickstarting it, or whether it be having an actual plan, right? An alternative plan, right? That could essentially benefit the citizens
There's
in
no
quoting
alternative though. There's
there
no
could be an
alternative.
alternative.
Well, like
Thing is,
alternative might be like including increasing the amount of transit. So like increasing those train connections.
yeah. Do you think there's any way though? The reason I said alternative is, do you think they could back out of this project?
I think
Is
it's
there a way
definitely
now to back out of this project, or is this because
I
I
think
read
it's
that?
definitely possible. We know politics, right? They can
Yeah,
change on the fly.
yeah,
I
because
don't think that backing out is a good idea at this point. In part because there's been so much work done, but also like if you look at Montreal's main areas of development, this was pre-COVID. One of the big main areas was the Cactier Midtown development. I don't know what's the formal name of it. Not discount, not 1540, but like the Royal Mount. Yes, the Royal
yeah,
Mount development. There's the Namur Hippodrome development, which is like really massive plot of land, right? You have the nearby developments happening in Westbury, which are all connected to this area. And then if you look at like the city's priorities with increased bike lanes and increased electrification of transit, this is one of the main routes that they've been proposing, right? This was like the heart and like the city. If you look at the city of Saint Laurent, the borough of Saint Laurent's master plan, they're like, we want a green ecological zone in the west of the sector, and that is the west of the sector, the Cavendish extension. If you look at like all the plans where it's a matter of we want to increase accessibility throughout the city, this is one of the main points that could be done. If you look at like the other sectors of interest on behalf of the city, one of them is the airport. Right now, whether the airport actually expands or not is a whole other debate. But if you look at what's being developed, like it's still in close proximity to the REM system, and like it loops around this area. So this area is still at the heart of future plans. Now, if you're asking me for any other alternatives, I don't think there is one, right? Like, this is a connection that's needed. I think like another alternative could be okay, forget the cars, we're just making it a bike and bus bridge, and that's it. That's an alternative. Cool. We can make a tunnel. That's an alternative. Sure. But I think this connection will happen.
you think this will happen?
I think I think it's needed and I think it will happen. It ties in with strategic and like if you look, I mean like one of the main priorities is going to be reinvesting in the downtown. If you want to bring people into the downtown, they need ways of getting to the downtown. If you're promoting active transport, one of the
Got to
ways
fix
is
the downtown
biking
first.
through the downtown. You got to fix the downtown, but if you want to be able to bring people into the downtown and bring them to keep it and tie the downtown together, you would need these initiatives that actually lead and direct flow.
mobility and accessibility, baby. And yeah, it could increase accessibility, but I think the one thing that's driving people as of right now, and hopefully it gets resolved soon, the one thing that's driving people away from the city right now, it's the constant, and we've seen this, the constant amount of construction.
Yeah,
Um, it's not driver for, like, a lot of people love driving to downtown, right? And
yeah,
hopefully maybe people's habits change, probably not soon, but over time. But as of now, a lot of people love taking their cars to
yeah,
downtown, to the city core,
yeah.
and not
But like,
having.
even if we're a matter of increasing the amount of cars going to downtown, the
Mhm.
carry is unbearable. Well, the carry wasn't unbearable. It still is unbearable, but
Yep.
driving on the carry is not fun, right? If we're pro car development, which we're
Mhm.
not saying we are, well, they need to do something about the carry and add more
Yep.
traffic, which will cause other problems because induced travel, which is the effect when you add more lanes, more people will
Mhm.
come and traffic will get more congested.
Good old
Um,
310.
310, 434. But the moment you add more cars to the system, you're adding more traffic at the end and you're decreasing how fast people get around. So, like, even if we're preaching for those car advocates, it's a great addition to the city because it's an enhanced east west corridor.
Mhm.
And right now, we don't really have any.
Yeah, I find when I really think about it and throughout the years, right, looking at Montreal's development pattern, it's all over the place, to be honest with you, right? Because if they think one project can resolve an existing project, that doesn't work.
Yeah,
It really doesn't. You're asking for further problems, right?
yeah,
Because even development projects within itself, it may fix something, but it might break something
yeah,
else
yeah,
in the meantime, right? And sometimes you can't see these things coming. You can make as
yeah,
many assumptions, predictions, or models based on what could happen, but there's always an issue that could spark
yeah.
once something is outputted. So, with
And
that
like,
being,
if you also look at like some of the city's long-term goals, they want to recover the Dakar Expressway. They want to take down Highway 40, right?
Mhm,
Those are complete monsters on their own. But what's another link in
mhm.
direct response to this? The Cavendish extension. What's near all this development? The Cavendish extension.
And just like, even along with the reasons that you've mentioned of why this project should continue and should eventually be more formalized, right? The fact that this project began in the mid 60s, and the fact that, like, look, now, like I said before, there's a timeline, right?
Yeah,
But the thing is, as you're moving forward in the timeline, and if you don't see much change, that's not an effective use of a timeline, or that just shows that you never had a timeline and you just kept stopping and then thought of it, stopping, kept going. Like, we need some consistency. We
yeah,
need dedicated planners, we need dedicated government officials, we need dedicated
yeah.
stakeholders,
And
right?
whether it's like establishing a task force or a committee
Yeah.
between the cities of this, and this. And like we've had these committees are in place, but I think their work needs to be shared a bit more than it currently is.
Definitely, man. So any other points you'd want to bring up?
Do the Cavendish extension, City of Montreal.
Yeah,
for,
and
for those city officials listening, I have a few words. Do the Cavendish extension.
tell them, Aaron.
Do the Cavendish extension if you are looking for dedicated planners to achieve this project. Me and Mo will help you out. Mo will look at the real estate side of things, and I will gladly do anything related to transit to help you out with this project.
Definitely, man. And yeah, and you know what? I want to say thank you for giving us all this information. I know you've always been interested in this project. I always love hearing from you. I always love seeing the different outlooks and the different perspectives you bring into it that most of us don't even think about, right? And I'm always happy just to be here and just add extra points and bug you a little bit more with questions, right? And if city officials are watching this, okay, like Aaron said, if
We
you
do
need
love the work
planners
that
or
you
you need.
do. We don't say that you're necessarily don't go along timelines. We appreciate the work that you do, but put the Cavendish extension on a timeline.
Exactly. Like, come on. It doesn't like, the timeline is just, there's no set timeline for it. There's no movement on it. And I think as future planners, we, we look at these things very objectively. We try to bring in many factors, and there's no disrespect at all. We always want what's best for the city and for the world to urbanize at a good, even rate.
What? The world to urbanize?
Yeah, like we're
Yeah.
looking towards
Yeah. Okay.
Montreal, but in general,
Yeah.
globally, I love looking at things from a global standpoint as
Yeah.
well. We want to see even development, and that applies more for third world countries. But we could face these problems here as well, but it's just goes more unnoticed, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic. But um, no, and look, astute, and I think bringing fresh minds into this, and this was continuing based on your comment to the city that if you need planners, involve both of us. And regardless if it's both of us or not, I think it's just important to realize that planners are a huge requirement in this. Yes, Brownstein has is a planner himself, like
Yeah.
that was his field, but bringing fresh minds to this, bringing different
Yeah.
perspectives, whether it be McGill students, whether it be us, I think it's something cities need to take a little bit more seriously, take our word a little bit more seriously, see where we're coming from. We're in the field. We're in the field for a reason because we have interest in the
Yeah.
field, and having multiple perspectives will make things probably will prolong the process, to be fair, but once there is an output, you can be sure that it's a pretty solid output.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And for those people listening who made it through what's probably an hour and 10 minutes of your time, and where you're like, okay, I did learn something, but Aaron rambled too much about this topic. Sorry, I'm interested in it. um,
I love
for
it
those
though.
who are listening, yes, it does take planners, but it's not only planners. It takes a team effort. And when it comes to anything you do, it's a team effort at the end of the day. Right? You could have brilliant ideas like Elon Musk does or Mitchell Brownstein has, but you need a team of people to actually execute this, right? You could be a computer engineer, you could be a software engineer and not want to talk to anybody, but chances are you need a team around you. So don't be annoying to your teammates.
Yeah,
Just
and this goes to
try
students as well.
just try to get along with your teammates, make the best of it, play to your strengths, learn from others.
Yeah, and look, even though you have people who you don't necessarily enjoy working with, and we've all been in that situation, right? Just keep in mind, like, just step back for a second and reflect and think about the fact that this is very temporary. Sure, you may have to put in extra work, right? But also keep in mind that how are there ways where if you're taking lead on this project and your teammates are noticing you putting in more work, how can you inspire them to put in the
Yeah,
same amount of work? How can you inspire more opinions from them? Can you now it becomes your job to inspire them and to lead them and to gauge their interest, right? Because you took on that initiative, right? Don't be like, oh yeah, I'm more interested, so I'll get it done. Like they're barely interested, and we're all at fault for that. And I'm sure
yeah,
in the professional field, this happens to a certain degree because that's just being human, right? Try to inspire your teammates. Try to use your leadership in a good way, right? I think that's what will lead to a lot of success and things to eventually move forward. So those are my final comments. I think we are done, Aaron. Don't be sorry
I
about
think
rambling. I really, really enjoyed all the information you had for us today, and I enjoyed engaging with you and making comments or asking you questions. And hopefully, a lot of the viewers got a lot of good information from Aaron and I on specific things and things that they were looking for.
and you have any further questions, comments, concerns, hesitations, remarks, um, feedback, please let us know.
Of course. Okay. Take care, everyone. See you on the
Have a
next
great
episode.
evening, day, or whatever time of day it is.
I'm tired, bro. I'm going to sleep.